Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining me today in this webinar. I'm Siddharth, a product consultant with ServiceDesk Plus, which is the flagship ITSM tool from ManageEngine. For those of you who don't know, ManageEngine is the enterprise IT management division of Zoho Corp. We have over 2 dozen applications that help organizations to manage their IT better. So, why are we here today? With the release of ITIL 4, a lot of talks revolve around ITSM best practices and how to utilize them to handle real life IT situations. So, subject matter experts have come up with a lot of blogs, webinars, and seminars talking about the adoption of these best practices. But it's easier said than done. So, because organizations need to bring the right people together, follow the right process, and leverage the right technology. So that's what we'll be focusing on in this webinar. So these are the 4 real-life scenarios that organizations commonly face. So we'll start off with how you can redefine your employee onboarding request, which is one of the most common form of service request. And then we'll move on to how you can handle a major incident and get your services back online as quickly as possible. Thirdly, we'll see how you can implement a major change with minimal risk. And finally, we'll see how you can roll out an OS upgrade across your enterprise in the context of IT asset management. So we came up with these 4 case studies based on situations faced by other organizations as well as those derived from our interactions with our customers. And needless to say, even at Zoho, we have faced these situations ourselves. So, building on all of that experience, we have crafted these workflows to help you with your transition to best practices in your ITSM tool. So, without further ado, let's dive right into our first scenario for today, which is redefining your new journey request. So, we'll see how you can turn your service request into a very satisfactory experience for your end users, for your hiring managers, and your new joinees. So this is the case study that we have here with us. We have this multinational tech company in California which designs, develops, and sells consumer electronics. So this company is right now in a phase of rapid expansion. So as to support this rapid expansion, they are aggressively hiring to fill almost 8,000 open positions. And these 8,000 open positions are spread across different geographical locations like New York, Seattle, and Texas, and are also distributed across different fields like hardware, software, and services. Keep in mind that this onboarding, or let me rephrase it, this large scale onboarding needs to be performed in a very short span of time. To put it in perspective, this is what a single new journey request entails. You have all these different departments like HR, IT, legal, facilities, who all have to perform their own set of tasks. And there are also a lot of interdependencies involved in the execution of these tasks. For example, the IT department would be able to provision IT devices and IT services only after the facilities department has provided the new joinees supplies desk and workstation. So, in the absence of an onboarding strategy or a platform to implement it, organizations would have to manage all this with legacy solutions like spreadsheets and email. So, on an average, for a single new journey request, your organization would send about 5 to 6 emails. Now, extend that to 8,000 new journey requests. That's a lot of data to handle via emails, and it's entirely possible that you would encounter all these different roadblocks. Starting with, you will lose a lot of essential data because it's quite possible and it's very human to make errors while tracking all the lots of emails that come through to your inbox. And we talked about how there are multiple departments and multiple technicians involved in the execution of tasks. So, in the absence of effective communication and coordination, a lot of IT silos may crop up, resulting in process lapses and inconsistencies in your onboarding process. So, this results in your service desk losing track of some tasks so that they fall through the cracks. And lack of automation for routine tasks such as approvals, routing, assignment results in a lot of delay. And not having an SLA is a cardinal sin in my opinion because SLAs ensure that you establish the customer's expectations and meet them in time. So all these roadblocks result in a very unsatisfactory experience for your hiring managers, for your new joinees, and for your service desk productivity itself. So how do you overcome all these roadblocks? Here is a best practice framework that we follow here at Zoho. So we have your hiring manager who raises a new hire request. The service desk then gathers just the essential details of the new joinee's requirements. Then automation kicks in, a five-stage approval mechanism is triggered, following which the service request is routed to the right technician who perform various tasks on them. And throughout this entire process, you have the clock ticking in the background in the form of an watertight SLA. So this is how you take your service request right from its initiation till its fulfillment. And this is in the service desk side of things. Throughout this entire process, you need to have your end user in the loop by sending constant notifications about the progress of his or her service request. So this ensures that they don't badger you with help desk calls or create duplicate requests. So that's how the best practice works theoretically, and let's see how you can implement it in an ITSM tool with the right capabilities. For this, we'll look at ManageEngine's ServiceDesk Plus. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the self-service portal of the hiring manager. As you can see, the hiring manager could go ahead and report an issue, request for a new service, or browse existing solutions in the knowledge base. So let's have the hiring manager request a new service. So as I click on request a service, the service catalog of the organization pops up. Let's select user management and click on single user onboarding. So what you see in front of you is a very typical web form that you would see in any organization, including yours. Right at the top, we have the SLA, which sets the hiring manager's expectations right at the beginning. We have some basic details like name, site, description. And scrolling down, we see there's just one field left. Now that is really surprising because we talked about how there were a lot of requirements with respect to the new joinee, and there's just one field to capture them all. So let's see what's going on over here. I go ahead and select this field as permanent. So as soon as I click on permanent, a new set of fields pop up. So this is what we call as a dynamic form. Dynamic forms ensure that your end users don't have to fill out long and lengthy forms, and it also helps your service desk to capture the right and concise information pertaining to the service request itself. So as you can see, once I select a role, such as a regional sales manager, another different set of fields pop up. So now that we've seen how the web form looks like in the hiring manager's portal, let's go ahead and see how the technician views it in his or her portal. So this is the technician's portal of the organization, and let's go to service catalog over here, click on user management, and select the same single user onboarding. So as you can see, this is the same web form that the end user or the hiring manager viewed, but with noticeable differences. As you can see, the total cost is displayed over here, and a lot of fields are visible now which previously weren't, such as approvers, group, etc. Scrolling down, we see that there are resources, a breakdown of costs, and most importantly, the selection of tasks. So you see that the technician has the independence or the ability to pick and select those tasks that that need to be performed for a particular service request. So how do you do this? How do you create such customized forms separately for the hiring manager and the technician for the same service? Let's go ahead and find out. So I click on admin module over here, and at your right, you will be able to see the service catalog. So this is where we create the service templates. So as you can see, all the service offerings are categorized neatly. Let me scroll over to user management and click on single user onboarding template. So as you can see, this is where we construct our web form. So we have this drag and drop canvas where you can just drag these, the fields which you would require on your template, and you can arrange them in a very visually appealing manner. And you can even add new fields if you'd want to with different data types. And as you can see, there are various sections ordered neatly. And scrolling down, we see a section named as resource info, where you can add questions which you would want to ask your hiring manager with respect to your new joinee's requirements. And then again, we saw the cost details. You can also associate various support groups to specific service templates. And finally, we see that you can expose a created template to just the right group of users. For example, you might have an HR specific template which could be accessible just to the HR team. So as you can see, this template figures takes everything into consideration and helps you to design a web form. And finally, let's make the web form dynamic. So as you can see, we have the field and form rules feature, which helps you to perform condition-based actions when the hiring manager is filling up the web form. So let's go back to our best practice workflow and see where we are. So as you can see, we had the hiring manager raising a new hire request and the service desk gathering the employee details through customized dynamic web forms. Now all that is left is to configure the workflow which this service request would progress through. So that could be done from within the template in a single tab. So let me click on workflow over here. And as you can see, this tab contains the approval mechanism, the SLA, as well as the different tasks which need to be performed for the fulfillment. So as you can add up to 5 stages of approvals in ServiceDesk Plus, and these approvals could either be named approvals or role-based approvals. And let's go ahead now that we have configured our approval process, let's go ahead and add a new SLA. So you create your watertight SLAs over here by defining or mandating the time limits for response and fulfillment. And in case of any violation of these mandated time limits, you could go ahead and configure your escalation mechanisms. Now, after creating an approval mechanism and configuring your SLA, you need to go ahead and define the various tasks which need to be performed for the fulfillment of this service request. So you could add different tasks over here and assign them to different support groups or particular technicians and ensure that they are performed in the right order. So we saw how there were a lot of interdependencies involved. So this is where you take them into consideration and ensure that they are effectively tracked and none of the tasks fall through the cracks. For that, we leverage the dependencies feature. So when you configure the task dependencies, you ensure that they are executed in just the right order. For example, these two tasks, such as the provision of external accessories and the installation of software, takes place only after the required hardware is procured. And only after all these tasks are completed, the induction process for the new joinee will take place. So this is how you ensure that none of the tasks are, fall through the cracks and the interdependencies are taken care of. So now we've created the workflow, defined the SLA, and ensured that a service template is in action. Now let's go back to our best practice workflow. As you can see, we went through each and every step, such as routing, the 5-stage approval mechanism, the SLA, and the tasks. Now all that is left is to see the service request in action. This is the service request which has been created. And as you can see, once it's created, all the details of the new joinee are gathered, represented in a very neat format, as you can see in front of you. The service cost is displayed. Scrolling further down, we have the conversations tab. So from here, you'll be able to initiate a conversation with your hiring manager in case of any clarifications. So as you can see, this is done from within the service ticket itself. And further down, we have the ticket-specific properties such as classification, categorization, and assignment. So let me quickly navigate through all these different tabs present in the service request. So we saw a lot about tasks. So all of the tasks configured in the template are carried over here. And if your technicians are performing work on the service request, they could record the effort and time they spent through the work logs. And so this is how the approvals will be reflected on a service request itself. As you can see, there are different stages of approvals which are both named as well as role-based. The time analysis helps you to keep track of essential metrics related to your service request. And finally, the History tab provides you a detailed audit on all the actions performed on your service request, and all those actions are also time-stamped. So let me again go back to our best practice workflow. As you can see, we followed each and every step, took the service request right from its initiation till its fulfillment. Now there's just one step remaining, which is to notify the end users regarding the progress made on the service request. For this, let's leverage automation. Notification rules, which is over here, it helps you to send automated notifications based on the actions performed on service requests. As you can see, you could choose to send an acknowledgement to your requester by email when a new request is received. Similarly, whenever a technician is assigned, when it is closed, you can choose to send similar notifications. And all of these notification templates are customizable so that you would be able to add ticket-specific information. So that is how easy it is to onboard 8,000 employees in a very short span of time using a best practice workflow. So now we've created a strategy and we've seen how an ITSM platform comes in so that we could implement the best practice workflow. Now all that is left is continual service improvement. For that, we'll make use of some of these KPIs. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the major KPIs that we feel you should keep tabs on. So it starts with ticket volume. You should measure your technician's productivity, your resolution time, and the number of requests in the backlog. So that could be, measured using the reporting module in ServiceDesk Plus. You have over 150 plus pre-configured reports, which help you to keep tabs on different kinds of metrics. And if that's not enough, you could go ahead and create your own custom reports and schedule them and email them to specific stakeholders. Apart from that, you have our graphical dashboards, which present information in real time that helps you to keep track of how well your service desk is performing. So that brings us to the end of our first scenario for today. Now, let's move to our second scenario, which is handling a major incident and getting your services back online. So as organizations, we don't really like major incidents, right? We try to steer clear of them. But it's always better to, anticipate the occurrence of these events in advance and have a strategy to deal with them. Because if not, it creates just chaos and confusion. So in this real life scenario, we look at an organization which did not have an incident management strategy and let's see how well they responded to a major incident. So this is the case study that we have. We have a web performance and security company that offers CDN, DNS, and DDoS protection to many websites. As a standard operating process, this company's firewall team regularly deploys new rules in their web application firewall. So this is done to, respond to new security vulnerabilities in the internet. So during one such routine update, a minor change made by one of their engineers spiked the usage of CPUs across their servers, bringing down half of the websites around the world. So what customers ended up seeing was a 502 bad gateway error. So as you can realize, this is a major incident of the highest magnitude. So let's break down the sequence of events in a timeline and let's see how the organization actually worked on it. So at 13:42, the outage actually happened and the services fail. As soon as that happens, they receive alerts from different monitoring tools and different alerts are created such as service down alerts, 502 error alerts, etc. 8 minutes into the incident, the SRE team realizes that something has gone wrong, and by that time, 80% of the traffic is already down. And so they speculate of an external attack, and finally they declare a major incident, realizing the impact of the incident. So their London engineering team is alerted about the global outage, and throughout this entire time period, their support team is flooded with calls, and phones are ringing off the hooks, and tickets are being raised a lot. 33 minutes into the incident, an incident response team is formed with members drawn from multiple teams. Yes, let me state it again. At the peak of chaos and confusion, 33 minutes after a major incident, an incident response team is being constituted. That's a major bottleneck right over there. So this IRT team is under intense pressure from the management and they are still not identified the root cause. And nearly an hour later, they dismiss the possibility of an external attack and finally figure out that the issue with the WAF. So a global WAF kill is implemented and finally the websites are taken back online. So as you can see throughout this timeline, there are major roadblocks such as recognizing an incident, putting together a team, communicating with stakeholders, and triaging. So how do we overcome all these bottlenecks so that your business is not affected? Here is a best practice workflow that we use in Zoho to combat major incidents. So it starts off with detecting an alert from the monitoring tool and converting it into a ticket in your service desk tool. So as soon as that happens, you recognize that there is a major incident. And then you communicate with your stakeholders such as your CIOs or your CTOs or managers of IRTs and bring them together to kickstart the process of triaging. So then you assess the impact of the incident and you choose whether or not to declare a major incident. And by now your end users would be panicking because they are unable to access critical business services. So you communicate externally to them, put out an announcement saying that there is an incident and that you're working on it. So by now, you create different tasks, delegate them to appropriate resolver groups who then provide the workaround and ensure that your services are taken back online. And there ends the boundary of incident management. Now we need to perform a root cause analysis and ensure that a recurrence of this major incident is not happening. For that, we need to create a problem ticket. So this is how you deal with a major incident effectively. Now let's see how you can leverage ServiceDesk Plus to do the same. What you're seeing on your screen right now is Op Manager, which is the network monitoring software from ManageEngine. So you can integrate Op Manager with ServiceDesk Plus and ensure that whenever a monitoring alert is created, you could automatically convert it into a ticket in ServiceDesk Plus. So what you're seeing right now is exactly that implementation. So as soon as a monitoring alert is created, this is how the ticket is reflected in ServiceDesk Plus. As you can see, a brief description of the incident is provided, and pretty much whatever you see is what we saw before in service request. So the next process is to communicate with stakeholders and inform them of this major incident. And for that, we'll make use of automation again, but this time it is the business rules. So business rules are condition-based actions which ensure that there is no time delay in communicating major incidents. So as soon as a ticket is logged with the error as with the subject as error file not detected or website down, these set of actions would be performed, such as setting the priority as a major incident and placing it in the appropriate support group so that they could kickstart the process of troubleshooting. And you could also send notifications to specific stakeholders, and those notifications could be in the form of an email or an SMS. So as you can see, that's how simple it is to communicate with stakeholders in real time. So this eliminates a major bottleneck. So let me go back to the workflow, best practice workflow again and show us where we are. So as you can see, we detected the major incident and we communicated immediately with our stakeholders. So the next step is to assess the damage that has happened and declare a major incident. So we saw how there are multiple tickets being created and multiple monitoring alerts being created, and which translate into multiple tickets. So you could link all these tickets together and ensure that you troubleshoot the major incident. So as you can see on your right side over here, all the affected assets are also associated with this incident tickets. So let me click on these assets, and as I soon do that, all the asset details are displayed. So there are detailed CI info, you have hardware, software information, and relationships are obtained from the CMDB. So this helps you to ascertain whether major services will be affected or not. As you can see, admin services and a complete geographical location, which is Delhi here, would be affected because this server hosts these two services. So what we do next is to go ahead and communicate this incident to your stakeholders. So for that, let me go to the home page of the technician and let's click on Add New Announcement. So you can create a new announcement over here and ensure that it is displayed within a specific time frame, and you can choose to show it to just the right group of affected users. So in this case, we saw that there were users of a particular location on a particular department who would be affected. So you can ensure that rest of the end users can carry on with their duties, and these end users are communicated to. So let us again go back to our best practice workflow and see how far we have arrived. So as you can see, we detected the occurrence of the major incident, we communicated it, we assessed the impact, and we communicated it via announcements. So all that is left is to delegate different tasks, kickstart the process of troubleshooting, which is providing a workaround. So for that, we'll go back to the incident ticket and click on tasks. So we discussed a lot about tasks previously in the service request. So as same as that, you could create different tasks associated to different groups and ensure that you configure the right dependencies. So and dependencies here matter a lot because triaging is really necessary, and in a major incident you need to follow a defined procedure. So once the tasks have been done and a workaround provided, you need to add it to your resolution. So you could go ahead and add your resolution over here, and if it had not occurred previously, you could add it to your knowledge base. So this will help you to combat future recurrences of the same incident. Now, we have completed the boundary or the domain of incident management. Now, all that is left is to create a problem ticket and initiate a root cause analysis as to what caused this incident in the first place. So for this, you could go to associations over here and click on create a new problem. So what happens here is all the details are carried over. You could create a new problem, and your technician or appropriate technician group would perform a root cause analysis. That's how easy it is. Now it looks very easy, right? We have overcome all the bottlenecks that the web performance company face. We ensured that we understood the best practice and applied it into your ITSM approach with the right capabilities. Now, as with the previous service request, we need to keep track of some essential metrics. This is very important because only then you would know what are the gaps present in your strategy and how well you can bridge them. So here you have your ticket volume, your technician productivity, your resolution time, and again your ticket churn. So I would advise you to create, complete unique dashboards for dealing with your major incidents. So as you can see, I've created a major incident management dashboard over here, which represents in real time the major incidents defined by category, by technician, and the number of incidents closed by technician. So that brings us to the end of our second scenario, and by now you should be confident of handling any future major incidents. Now, let's step on to our second half of our webinar, which is how to build a structured approach to effectively roll out a major change. So organizations often undertake major changes to perform significant improvements to their products and services. But a lot of planning needs to go into it because you need to bring the right stakeholders on board and ensure that you're prepared for all types of contingencies. And also, your end users should be acceptable to the change. For if not, the change might end up harming the organization more than achieving the intended benefits. So we'll see that how you can implement a successful change with a real life scenario. So we have this SMB here who decide to move their on-prem infrastructure to the cloud for the obvious advantages of speed, reliability, and security. So this is what they have initially. They have their Active Directory, their ADFS, a lot of applications, data, and Exchange mail servers stored on premise. And this is what they aim to achieve. They decide to transition to an Azure Active Directory, and they also decide to make use of Office 365 and other SaaS applications. But as you can see, this is a very large undertaking because it involves moving multiple applications and a lot of people and data. But unfortunately, most organizations, when it comes to implementing such major changes, adopt this approach. Close your eyes and hope for the best. So what organizations do is that they just go in blind without any sort of planning for different contingencies with a just do it attitude. Now that might make a fancy slogan for Nike, but that's totally not going to cut it if you're aiming for a successful implementation. Because if you do so, all things just fall apart. Starting with, you'd have to end up handling different types of changes with the same change process. Because one size fits all approach does not help you in this case, and creates unexpected setbacks such as unplanned outages and a lack of resources. And since these outages have not been, predicted beforehand, a failure to communicate them creates opposition among your end users. And a lack of approval mechanism just adds on to the delay in the change lifecycle. And again, I've been stressing on how planning is crucial to a successful implementation, right? And in case of a failure in the change implementation, and let's say that you don't have a rollback plan, it leads to a loss of data and complete chaos. So all these different roadblocks create poor visibility and an inability to track the change implementation to its successful closure. So you started this major change just to improve your services and you created a catastrophe. But fortunately for this SMB, they have embraced this change with ServiceDesk Plus, and that allowed them to step off in the right direction by following this best practice workflow. So they started off by defining the various types of changes that they were going to handle. So they created different types of changes, built change workflows on top of them, and defined those workflows by breaking them down into 6 custom stages. So once they've broken it down into smaller pieces, it becomes really easy because they create detailed impact rollout plans, they communicate the downtime effectively to their end users, and they carry the implementation real carefully. And finally, they undertake a post-implementation review and perform continual service improvements by analyzing change metrics. Now that might seem a lot, but let's see how simple it is to implement in a service desk tool. So again, we are back to the technicians portal and let me go to quick actions over here, click on change and create a new change ticket. So what you're seeing right now is a similar web form to what we saw with service request with minor differences. So you have this mini calendar on your left hand side, which shows you the number of changes which have been scheduled. As you can see, no other changes are scheduled, which helps you to avoid change collisions. And as you can see, certain fields which are different over here are your change types. So I again said about how this SMB has defined different types of changes, right? So all of them are carried over here, such as documented, emergency, major, normal, standard. And they've also created different workflows to handle these different types of changes. And over here, we have change requester, the change owner. We have the scheduled start, services affected, and a reason for change. Scrolling down, we see that there's something known as roles. So what are these roles? Change roles in ServiceDesk Plus helps you to set access permissions for different stakeholders involved in your change implementation. For example, the implementer over here would be able to access the change request, modify it only during the implementation phase. So this helps you to set silos within which your stakeholders will operate, ensuring that no unauthorized activities take place on your change ticket. So once we fill all of these different fields, we will create this change request. So I've shown you how a change request is actually created. Let me go ahead and show you quickly how a change workflow looks like. So here we have our change workflows. Let me click on the emergency workflow. So as you can see, we have the different change stages broken down into 6 stages, and based on the actions performed on the change ticket within these stages, certain transitions would take place. For example, if the change ticket is accepted in the submission stage, it would move to the implementation phase. That is because this is an emergency change. And in that process, you'll be able to notify specific change roles such as change approver and your change manager. So these workflows ensure that you create distinct, unique workflows for each different type of changes. Now, let's go back to our best practice workflow. So as you can see, we had the SMB create different change types, different change roles. They built change workflows. They brought all these building blocks together with a change template. Now, all that is left is to break down the change process into 6 stages and perform the detailed impact rollout plans. Let me take you to the actual change ticket created by this SMB. So here we go. As you can see, this is how a change ticket would reflect once it has been created. So as you can see, we have 6 different stages starting with submission and ending with close. So in the submission stage, the the change requester would provide a solid reason for the change, and he or she could go ahead and create attachments and also bring out a detailed reason. Scrolling down, we see some change details and the roles associated with this change ticket. So once the submission stage has been completely filled up, the change approver would assign this request. Now that once that has been done, the change ticket moves to the planning stage. So this is where a detailed impact assessment is taken up, your rollout plans are defined, and your backward plans are defined. So in the impact stage, the detailed impact on different critical services are displayed over here. The rollout plan in detail describes the implementation, and in case of any unforeseen circumstances leading to a failure in the change implementation, you have your backward plan. The implementation checklist helps the change team to ensure that they don't lose track of any essential things that are required for the change. And all this planning gives you some insight on what services will go down, and you can create appropriate downtimes. So once you create these downtimes, you will also communicate it to your end users from within this change ticket. So we click on actions at the top, and we can choose to make an announcement from within the change ticket and also send notifications to specific stakeholders. Now, once the planning has been done in detail, the change ticket is put through an approval process. So in the approval stage, your change advisory board comes together, and you can add different change advisory boards and different members of the CAB and ensure that they sit together and review the planning. So once they once they sit together and perform the planning, they're really happy with this, the planning, and they go ahead and approve the change ticket. Once they do that, the change ticket proceeds to the implementation stage. So as you can see in the implementation stage, we have projects, tasks, and work logs and downtime scheduling. So why projects? If this had been a minor change, we would just be, done with defining tasks and recording the work logs. But this is, as we saw before, a very large undertaking, which involves large number of tasks and different technicians. So what we do is we create projects to efficiently track the progress of the implementation. For that, we define different milestones and associate tasks to these different milestones. As you can see, this is a lot of tasks, so how you can't effectively handle them from within the change ticket. So you use the tight integration with the project management module. So you can bring all the different members. So that's a really large list, as you can see. So you can bring all of these members together in the project. The Gantt chart helps you to track the implementation of the tasks, the milestones effectively. So you can, have a bird's eye view on what is happening with respect to your change implementation. So this really eases the process of change implementation and ensures that it proceeds seamlessly and concludes successfully. So let us quickly go back to our best practice workflow and see how far we have arrived. So as you can see, we created detailed plans, we communicated the predicted downtimes to your end users, and we implemented the change using a project. Now all that is left is to carry out a post-implementation review to ensure that the change was performed successfully. So for that, we go to the review stage. So in the review stage, we will add our comments pertaining to the review, and we take care of any patchwork that need to be done for this particular change. So once the change has been implemented, it proceeds to its successful closure. So as you can see, there were absolutely no risks involved, or let me rephrase it. We ensured that all the risks were preempted using the right capabilities. So that is how easy it is to make improvements to your services by using a proper ITSM tool. Now, all that is left is to analyze change metrics to enforce continual service improvement. So these are the essential metrics that we believe you should measure, such as number of incidents caused by your change, percentage of unplanned outages, and percentage of backed out changes. So this will help you to provide a picture as to how well your change management strategy is coping up and whether it is successful or not. Now, let's proceed to our final scenario for today, which is how to build a rock-solid IT asset management strategy to control your IT infrastructure. So organizations such as educational institutions typically manage hundreds of assets. So for example, an educational institution would have to manage the students' workstations, the workstations of management, sometimes faculty, etc. So, and they also need to monitor each of these assets, ensure that all the operating systems are upgraded, and take care of any security vulnerabilities. So we'll see how that is done in the context of an educational institution. So in this case, we have an educational institution which has to upgrade from Windows 8 to the latest operating system. And that is because, as we all know, Windows 8 was EOL'd in 2016 and mainstream support has already ended in Jan 2018. While limited patch updates are available, this still poses a big security threat because you wouldn't really be receiving major security updates. So that exposes the this educational institution's assets for cyber attacks such as malware and ransomware. And the concern here is that several PCs in various labs still run on Windows 8. So they face some major challenges in responding to this situation. So those were drilling down to those assets which were vulnerable, identifying the software, and rolling out the upgrades with minimal disruption. So the third challenge was because some of these assets supported their critical IT services. So they had to ensure that the upgrade process did not cause any ripples throughout their organization. So here is a simple 5-step process to approach this scenario. First, you create a single source of truth for all your software assets. Secondly, you identify just the eligible licenses managed by the university. Three, based on the dependencies, we identify the critical assets. And finally, we plan the new or upgraded license purchases and monitor the entire upgrade process. So here is the workflow again. And let's see how the asset management module in ServiceDesk Plus helps you to implement this workflow. Let me click on admin module over here. And as you can see right at the center of your screen, you have something known as discovery. These various discovery techniques allow certain scanning methods which help you to scan all assets which are part of your organization. So the Windows agent configuration, provides a Windows agent which helps you to fetch software and hardware inventory information from your Windows workstations and servers. The network scan allows you to discover networks which are part of your organization and scan assets which are part of such networks. The distributed asset scan comes handy when you have assets distributed across different geographical locations, and sometimes organizations use Microsoft SCCM for their inventory management. So we have SCCM integration too, which helps you to fetch all such asset data onto ServiceDesk Plus. So once you've leveraged all these discovery techniques, you would have created a single database of all your assets. Let me click on Assets to show you one such database. So as you can see, this is the database of that educational institution we talked about. We have all the workstations which were detected and inventoried. We have all the asset classifications such as those assets in store, those which have been unassigned, those in use, those in repair, etc. So let me quickly show you how the asset details look like. So let me click on the 0141 asset. So as you can see, the CI details are displayed, which provide an overview as to what this asset, operates. The hardware information provides you detailed, information regarding the processor, network adapters, hard disk, etc. Again, have your software information, which has all the software installed on this particular asset. And the relationships tab, as we saw before, provides you all the dependencies which are fetched from your CMDB. The History tab provides you a history of the workstation scan history and the asset ownership history. Requests. So sometimes you might have assets which are the cause of incidents, or you might have requests which are associated to assets. So you can associate all of them in this tab. So you can even associate problems and change details. And in case you're creating specific contracts related to assets, you could really go ahead and add them over here. And finally, we'll come to the Financials tab. The Financials tab helps you to view the cost information associated with assets. So that is really important because IT departments typically spend a lot in maintaining assets. So we could configure depreciation methods and measure the current book value, the remaining useful life, so that it would be really handy when you're planning for future purchases or leases. So now we've created all of our assets into a single database. Let's go back to our best practice workflow again. So we created a single source of truth using the various discovery techniques. Now all that is left is to identify the eligible licenses associated, and among those, the critical assets, and finally roll out the OS upgrade. So let me click on software over here, and more specifically the software summary. So once you've scanned all your assets, all the associated software licenses would automatically be fetched onto your database. So as you can see, you have the compliance tab over here, which provides you a picture on how compliant you are with your software licenses. And over here, you have different classifications of software, such as managed software, prohibited software, freeware, etc. So since Windows 8 is a software which is being managed by this organization, let me click on Manage Software. So right at the top, we have Windows 8 Professional Edition. So this is being EOL'd. So we are concerned with identifying those assets which are vulnerable. So as you can see right now on your screen, this educational institution has purchased 14 Windows 8 licenses, of which 4 have been installed on specific assets. Let me click on that, and as you can see, we have identified those 4 assets which are right now running on Windows 8. So since we have created a single database of all assets, the process of drilling down and identifying assets which were vulnerable was made real easy. Now the next step is to identify the critical assets. So let me click on the third server over here, and the relationships drawn from the CMDB would help us to identify the criticality of this asset. So let me go on to the relationships tab, and as you can see, the email services are being hosted on this particular asset, which means in case of a cyber attack or in case of any security vulnerability, this educational institution's email services would have to take the hit, and we wouldn't really want that. So we need to roll out an OS upgrade to this asset as soon as possible. So let me go back to software being run on this asset. We'll scroll down to Windows 8 Professional Edition, and let me go ahead and select this particular asset, and if I click on actions, there I have the add software license option. So we could go over here and upgrade the license by providing the purchase license and the license key associated with this. So this helps you to update your database and monitor the upgrade process through its entirety. So first, it seemed like a very daunting task, right? We had hundreds of assets and we needed to identify just 4 among them. But since we had created a single database and had the right capabilities, we were able to do it in just few seconds. So I hope that would have really helped you if you're managing hundreds of assets and if yours is a very large enterprise. Now, as usual, we'll have to look at some of the metrics that matter and that which you need to track. So you need to control your IT spend, and for that, you need to measure the average cost of acquiring a workstation. Your organization should also stay license compliant. So you should measure the ratio of used licenses to purchase licenses. And again, you need to plan your future purchases, identify discrepancies with respect to assets, and optimize your asset usage. So these are the metrics specific to such categories which would really help you to manage your assets real easy. So let me just leave the screen on for a few seconds for you to take note of that. And we've also arrived at the end of our webinar. So let me quickly summarize what we saw today. So we discussed 4 different IT situations. We discussed each of them in detail. We saw the associated challenges or roadblocks in some cases, and we saw how a best practice workflow comes in handy in responding to such situations. And finally, and most importantly, we saw what are the right capabilities that an ITSM tool should have for implementing these best practices in real life. So I hope now that you would have some kind of clarity on how we can go about translating these best practices into your ITSM approach. So that brings this webinar to a closure. And if you have any questions related to what we discussed today, please go ahead and ask. So in case you're wondering that you need to go back to certain things that we discussed, don't worry. We will be sending you a recording of this webinar via email along with the FAQs. And in case you have any further queries, you could also send an email to hello@servicedeskplus.com or to this email ID over here, which is displayed on your screen right now. So that is my email ID, and you could go ahead and ask any questions which you feel will help your organization. So guys, thank you for joining this webinar today, and have a nice day. Thank you. And once again, if you have any further queries, you could send an email to the email ID displayed on your screen. Have a nice day. Thank you.